On this episode of Gameball Kickoff, we're going to break down the Big Ten Conference, as well as have our very own experts give you our rankings for each team in their respective divisions. Stay tuned. It's going down right here. Gameball Kickoff begins now. What's happening, everyone? Welcome to Gameball Kickoff, where the football season never ends. I'm Marcus Young Genius Jenkins.
I'm Michael Riley.
And I'm Luke Hartnett.
All right, this week's episode brings us to the Big Ten Conference. We're going to break down both divisions. We're going to kick things off in the Big Ten West Division, starting with the University of Illinois. The Fighting Illini finished with a record of only 2-10 back in 2017. Mike and Luke, actually, you both have them ranked number 7, dead last in the West. Mike, we'll swing with you first. Why did you pick them to finish dead last?
Well, they need to rebuild over again. I think Lovie Smith's time at Illinois is coming to an end because sometimes when new coaches come from different places like NFL, they usually don't work out, and the college coaches that go to the NFL usually don't work out. The offense, the defense, and special teams are anemic. I mean, they make some plays, but most of the times they get blowed out. There was only a couple of games here and there where they were competitive, but overall, is Lovie Smith's times Illinois is coming to the end, I believe, and they're dead to last in the conference and that division. So that's my take on it.
One thing I want to ask you before I swing to you, Luke, is speaking of which, when you were talking about college coaches translating their success to the NFL and vice versa, do you feel like, this was obviously anybody would take a chance on Lovie Smith, granted his track record. Do you feel like he would have another shot maybe somewhere else still in the college football profession?
Maybe not in the college, but in the pros, yes. Maybe as a defensive coordinator, because there are those rare breeds of coaches that can translate from different system, one from NFL to the college level to the NFL. Are those rare breeds, and you only find a few of them. Pete Carroll is a prime example, because back in the day, he used to coach New England Patriots. He was horrible there, then got fired. Coached at USC, won winning records, had national championships. Then he goes from USC to Seattle, went to Super Bowl there, and lost the Super Bowl. So that's an example of a rare breed coach that can adapt to anything.
Luke, I want to swing this to you. You obviously saw things the same way as Mike did, and you also picked them to finish 7th in the Big Ten West. Why did you pick them as well?
It's just a hard school to recruit to. It's not, to my knowledge, it's not really a quote unquote private school. But you think about it. Illinois, they've never really had a stretch of success. I mean, they had that one Rose Bowl appearance against UCLA back when the quarterback that's on TV now, Neuheisel, back when Neuheisel was quarterbacking them. Didn't really follow it up for a while after that. They had the Simeon Rice and the Kevin Hardy years, but they were good. They weren't great. They had a solid team with Kurt Kittner quarterbacking them, and right around the turn of the century, went to the Sugar Bowl, got clocked by LSU, kind of fell off the map for a little bit after that. Juice Williams somehow got them into the Rose Bowl. They got hammered by USC again. But there was never any sustained success there, and I think if Lovie Smith was going to go to take a head coaching job somewhere else, he'd want to go to a school that for lack of a better term, that recruits itself, where the name does the recruiting there.
Right.
All that being said, Illinois actually can make a bowl game this year. They have a fairly easy non-conference schedule. They get South Florida at home. They beat South Florida. That will presumably put them to 3-0. They played two of the Big Ten East, at least presumed lower tier teams in Rutgers and Maryland. I think they get Purdue at home. I think they're at Minnesota, but I mean, those are 50-50 games at best for them. But I mean, all that being said, they could still get to that magical 6-win mark.
Do you think if they were able to improve off of their record from last year, do you think that would potentially take Lovie Smith out of the hot seat, or do you think that's maybe like a show and prove, show me once, now show me twice?
He's got to get the 6. He's got to get the 6.
All right, so the line
and plus, you're going recruiting wise. There's a lot of good football players in the Illinois area. Either they're going to Michigan or Ohio State, so that's kind of tough for what he was alluding to the recruiting wise, because you got big name coaches like Jim Harbaugh and Urban Meyer that dominate in that whole state. So if you can kind of find some way of getting recruits there, that'll be fine. But if Lovie Smith gets fired, you have to have a big name coach and some recruiters to recruit out of that state.
Illinois could be so good if they have. I mean, some coaches are going to win regardless of where they go. I don't even mean championship coaches. I mean, Chris Peterson. I mean, Mark Richt. I mean, he mentioned Harbaugh. I mean, they get the right guy in there, they'd be able to clean house.
That's what I'm saying. So if Lovie Smith, say for instance, does not pan out this year, he gets fired. You have to have a big household name, a head coach, not big, just big enough to get traction.
So unfortunately for the Illini, a name like Lovie Smith, you would think would attract a lot of recruits. Unfortunately, that hasn't panned out. Maybe they'll have a better track record though than 2-10 like they did in 2017. That's going to take us to the next team we're going to discuss, and that is the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Nebraska finished with a record of 4-8 last season. Luke, we're going to start with you. You have Nebraska ranked third in the Big Ten West. How did you come up with that rank?
I just think Scott Frost is going to come in there and just raise hell from the very beginning there. I mean, it's not like one of those situations where the thing about Nebraska is they don't – he's not walking into a team where, I mean, the talent's just going to kind of resurrect itself. We talked about that with a few of the ACC schools, last week. You get some of the some places they're never lacking talent, and case in point, when we get to the SEC, take Tennessee for example. That new coach they have in there, I mean, he's not going to be short on talent. Not to make this an SEC show or anything, but when Dan Mullen gets to Florida, he's going to have tenfold the talent he had at Mississippi State there. Like, they're going to be ready to go. The Nebraska doesn't quite have that, not quite that skilled. They kind of cut off the Texas pipeline going to the Big Ten from the Big 12. They do have a difficult schedule. They get Michigan State at home. Most of the other heavy hitters are on the road. They're at Michigan, they're at Ohio State, they're at Iowa, they're at Wisconsin. So I'm kind of taking a leap of faith picking them to finish third there. That's all on Frost.
All right, Mike. You actually have them ranked a little bit, actually quite low. You actually have them finish sixth. What made you pick them to finish?
They got that hard schedule.
And plus last season how they finished, and Mike Riley, the former head coach, good. Thank God they got rid of him because he didn't know what he was doing in Nebraska. It seems like, I mean, he was just in a loss, and the record speaks for itself. So he's no longer there. They got rid of the athletic director. They just cleaned house, and they was like, okay, we got to hire our former admired player who led us to a couple national championships. Also led Central Florida to an undefeated season, beating a good team in Auburn. So they brought him back and got his coaching staff there. And the one that, they got everything in place so far. offensive, defensively, but the only question I have is the quarterback spot. Because I was watching some of their spring games, their quarterback spot is still suspect to me. So if you can find a quarterback, especially a pure pocket passer, I mean, dual quarterbacks, they're good, but I'd rather have a pocket passer quarterback that can get me the ball, knows when to make plays, and knows when not to throw bad passes. So if they can find a quality quarterback at this spot, then their record be higher. So that's my take on it. And Scott Frost is going to make a bowl his first season. I'm predicting that. So it's got to be, okay, let's make a run at it this year for me to move them up.
Week 2, they get Colorado at home. Kind of interested to see that rivalry renewed.
Old Big 12 rivalry.
Old Big 8 rivalry.
Yeah.
But no, Scott Frost, he'll take a page out of the Bill Snyder playbook, protect the ball, limit the penalties, play solid D. They'll finish third.
All right, Nebraska Cornhuskers. That's going to take us now. We're going to go from Nebraska. We're going to go to the University of Minnesota. The Minnesota Golden Gophers, they finished 5-7 back in 2017. Mike, we're going to kick this one off to you. You have them finishing 5th in the West Division. Why'd you pick them 5th?
Well, first it was like kind of the new coach from Central Michigan, I think the University Western Michigan, coming into the Big Ten house, and he did okay. I mean, there's a couple of games that they lost in the last seconds of the game that cost them a bowl. For instance, Purdue game, Patriots rookie linebacker who was drafted, former linebacker at Purdue named Jawan Bentley, at the last second picked off Minnesota, took it to the house, and won them a game. So if they would have won 1 or 2 more games, they would have been bowl eligible, and that would look good on their new head coach's resume. So 5 wins is pretty good for most places, starting off with your first head coach coming off from another division as well. So if he can find the way to recruit a little bit better, because you're going up against Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Ohio State, and Michigan State, and so on, the big name houses in that conference. So if you can do a little bit better in recruiting, then the sky's the limit for this team. So I have them finishing 5th, and then 5 and 7 if they can recruit better, and I will give them a higher ranking.
All right, Luke, you actually have Minnesota just a rank lower. You actually have them finishing 6th in the division. Why'd you pick them in that time?
I just think the other teams are better than they are. I mean, as it stands right now, I think the Big Ten for the most part is a 2-horse race between Wisconsin and Iowa. I think it's just a matter of time, a year or two before Nebraska throws their name in the hat there. Purdue's got a great young coach in Jeff Brom there, the old Louisville quarterback. He's got them going in the right direction. Had them in a bowl game last year. I believe they won their bowl game last year against Arizona, if I'm not mistaken. So they got some momentum on their side. And Northwestern, they're always just kind of that wild card that can never seem to win the division, but they never seem to finish any worse than 4th or 5th either. So I mean, it's just kind of a war of attrition there. It's going to take PJ Fleck a little bit to get the recruiting to Minnesota. Granted, they're the only D1 school in the state there, but it's kind of slim pickings. And now the thing he has going for him, it's a very solid division, the Big Ten West is, but it's much more fathomable for Minnesota to win that division than it would be. He doesn't have to compete with the Big Ten East for the most part, at least not on a top. They get their crossover games and the 2 or 3 they got to play, year in, year out or whatever else. But you draw, Maryland, Rutgers, Indiana, et cetera, you're going to have a lot better chance than, say, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, whatever else. So, but no, I think I think Nebraska gets it going this year. We know about we know about Iowa and Wisconsin. I think Northwestern's going to produce. I think Purdue's going to produce. It's just like I said, war of attrition.
All right, Minnesota, Luke and Mike, 5th and 6th respectively for the Golden Gophers. Once again, they finished with a 5-2 record last year in 2017. That's going to bring us to the Purdue Boilermakers. Purdue finished with a record of 7-6 last season. Luke, we're going to start with you. You have them finishing 5th in the Western Division.
It's kind of what I just reiterated with Minnesota there. I just think the other teams ahead of them are going to be better than they are this year. not necessarily a knock on them. They could they could win 7-8 games still. They're going to need a couple of breaks to go their way, this, money, and that, whatever else. But the thing I don't like about Purdue is that I wouldn't pick them to beat Iowa home or away. I wouldn't pick them to beat Wisconsin home or away. No, Northwestern Nebraska, to a lesser extent Minnesota. Okay, home field, maybe I'll pick it, maybe I won't. It kind of depends. Are they coming off of a bye? Is the opponent coming off of a bye? Who they played the week before, so on and so. I haven't quite broke down the schedule that much yet with them, but I think Purdue could be a 2019 team to be a real sleeper on. But they're, Brom's still getting it going. They had that nice bowl win over Arizona last year. I put it this way. I think fifth is their absolute, not their ceiling, but their basement, for lack of a better term. I think they can finish as high as second, actually. They would need a lot to break right their way. Injuries to other teams, upsets here and there, whatever else. But I think second or third is attainable. They won't finish any worse than fifth.
Do you think that this is a program that's more on the rise, but they still have a lot of proving to do?
They're definitely on the rise. They are, somewhat private, not necessarily a private school, but they're, academically they're kind of big into engineering or whatever else. But anyhow, Brom, he's going to get some quarterbacks in there. So the longer he stays there, which I don't think he's going to be there any more than 3 to 5 years anyway, because I think he's going to have Purdue going like that, where he takes that big payday somewhere else at granted, Purdue is a Power 5, but I think he's going to, if one of those creme de la creme jobs open up, I can see him, taking that when it's offered to him. But should he stay at Purdue for a hot minute or whatever else, it's going to be one of those. It's going to be every quarterback he's getting better and better in the last.
All right, Mike, you actually have them ranked just actually one slot higher. You actually have them finishing fourth. Why did you have them finishing a little bit higher?
Well, they played good football last season. And they could have won more games, close games rather, and they probably would have been a little bit better bowl. But Ohio State and Michigan, you just forget it. They're the big dogs of that conference. And if they can recruit a little bit better, especially on defense, then you can find themselves fight for that spot to possibly compete for that division and possibly compete for the Big Ten championship. My knock on Purdue is they didn't finish games in the fourth quarter like they should. Games that they win, they barely finished off in the fourth quarter, and maybe a blowout here and there, but against close opponents and good teams, you have to finish that game. Like, instance, with Louisville, they had them dead to rights one, and turnover, penalties, too many middle errors that cost them the game because they shut down Lamar Jackson for the first 3 quarters of that game until once Louisville started getting going on, it was lights out and Purdue could not recover back. So if they can find a way to finish games in the fourth quarter instead of being the first 3.5 quarters of the team, then they'll be able to get some good quality wins and maybe a better record. So that's my only knock on Purdue, but I've seen them having a good future and a coach and Brom and developing quarterbacks. They just got to get a little bit better finishing out the games. They also had to get a little bit better on defense with consistency.
So the Purdue ball makers, would you both agree? The potential is obviously there. Just maybe add a piece here and there, and we're maybe having a different conversation.
Well, they like a little consistency. They went to Missouri last year, won 35-3. Missouri went to a bowl game, played Texas in one of those middle tier bowl games. So Missouri wasn't exactly a chopped liver by a long stretch, but they still had to win their bowl game to finish over 500.
Yeah, about 1-2 here, piecing apart, they'll be up there.
All right, so Purdue, fair enough to say, this will be a team definitely to look out for. We'll see if they can improve on a 7-6 finish from 2017. We're going to move to the Iowa Buckeyes, who finished with a not too bad record of 8-5 back in 2000. The Iowa Hawkeyes, but they finished with a record of 8-5. I appreciate that, Mike. Back in 2017, Mike, I want to start with you. You actually have them ranked third in this division.
Well, Iowa got to the hot start last season until they played against Penn State. They had them dead to rights. It was about 8 seconds left, and their defense couldn't finish it because Penn State's offense was able to deliver at the end. They played good against Pitt State.
That was the best game of the year in college football last year.
Exactly.
You know, a little off topic there, but I didn't see one better.
Yeah, and so if they would have found a way to get that stop, I think they would have been a little bit higher than that. It just seems like they once they lost that game at home with thousands of crowd, they just felt defeated and felt like their life was taken away and lost another close game against Michigan State. Then they come back and beat the living snot out of Ohio State at home like 1-0, cost Ohio State from going to the 14 playoff. It's just like sometimes when Iowa gets good wins, they just like hit or miss. They get a good win, then they lose. They getting a close to win, and they feel defeated and go on maybe 1-2 game losing streak. So if Iowa somehow, some way can reload on defense, because they lost a lot of good players on defense, especially at the corner spot. So if they could solidify the defensive line and the corner and maybe the linebacker spot, and offensively they got to get the center who was drafted in the first round. So if they can replace those positions and you also have the quarterback coming back, the sky's the limit for Iowa, but they have to learn how to finish very close games against very good teams. And at the end, if they would have did that, they would have been way on the radar than where they are now.
All right, Luke, you actually have them ranked a little bit higher, actually. You have them ranked finishing second this upcoming season.
Yeah, and they actually have an easier schedule than Wisconsin does, too. I think it's going to be basically those two teams going to be battling it out. Iowa, they get a lot of good games at home this year. Week 2, Iowa State goes to Iowa City. Iowa State's coming a long way. They got that great Matt Campbell coach, and he's an up-and-comer there for them. Iowa State also has presumably the number one draft prospect at running back in David Montgomery. So that's going to be some must-see TV Week 2 in Iowa City there. They get Nebraska at home to finish the season. 2 weeks after the Iowa State game, they're back home against Wisconsin. That's going to be Wisconsin's really first true test. They played BYU the week before that. BYU's not quite what they was even 3 years ago. So they won't play a road game until the end of September when they go to Minnesota. I think they win that game though too. They do have to go to Penn State, but for the most part, everyone else comes to their place. So I mean, it's they're sitting pretty, no doubt.
All right, Iowa the Hawkeyes, once again finished with a record of 8-5 in 2017. Looks like they're continuing to prove, and definitely the ceiling is definitely there for them to have a successful season, not only in the West Division, but in that Big Ten Conference as a whole. We're going to jump to the University of Northwestern. They finished with a record of 10-3 last season. Luke, I want to kick this off with you. You have them finishing fourth in the West Division.
Well, I just think Iowa and Wisconsin are head and shoulders better than they are, and like I said, I'm taking a leap of faith on Nebraska. For them to finish 10-3 last year is just absolutely mind blowing when you consider that one of their 3 losses was a 41-17 setback at Duke. I don't know offense against Duke. Duke was the home team. Duke was a decent team last year. They went to a bowl game, yet again. It shouldn't have been 41-17 though. Number one, number two, they still managed to win 10 games after that. So. Very, very good coaching job by Pat Fitzgerald there. I led off by saying Illinois is kind of a hard place to recruit. Northwestern's not the hardest place to recruit to in the Big Ten. It might be the hardest. Duke, Notre Dame, and Stanford might be the only places even equally difficult to recruit to. So, and Notre Dame somehow has made a career out of it. They have a nice mix of home and away games, and they got. I just felt. I think 4 is a very safe bet. I don't think they'll finish any worse than that. Picking them to finish as high as number 2, they could. That's a pretty big leap of faith, though.
All right, and speaking of which, Mike, you do have them finishing second in the West Division. Why did you have them picking so high? Did the record have anything to do with that?
Yeah, the record did, and the some games that they lost last season, that was on them, and they got beaten. They didn't play well. The games that did win, they play well consistently, especially on defense, and get the running game going. and also quarterback making plays and not putting himself in a bad position to not make bad plays. So that's a good part on them. With Northwestern, it just kind of reminds you they bend but don't break in certain aspects. Like, for instance, against Wisconsin, they gave a run for their money for the first portion of the game until Wisconsin blew them off the water. So if they can find a way to keep teams from scoring much points and keeping it close, Wisconsin might have some chances to upset some teams and be there. So they got to do better offensively and defensively. But too bad that quarterback transfer out of Clemson, they have to wait another year for him due to the transfer rules and all that stuff. So they got that in the future. But if they can duplicate it and do a little bit better from last season, they can finish higher at number 2, maybe number 1 in that division. Just depends on how they play out against Wisconsin, Iowa, and so on. So we'll just have to see.
All right. Northwestern looking to build off of a strong season. Once again, finishing with a record of 10-3 in 2017, which brings us to that number 1 spot. Mike and Luke, you both have this team, and that is the University of Wisconsin. The Badgers finished with a very successful 13-1 record in 2017. Luke, we'll start with you first. Why do you have them finishing first?
Everyone talks about Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State from the Big Ten East, and rightfully so. But Wisconsin, I think they belong in that same breath there. They wind up beating most of them teams from the East Division when they get their crack at them. They do have a difficult schedule this year, though. Outside of the non-conference, I believe they go to Michigan, they go to Penn State, they go to Iowa. So they got some football, definitely some pit holes in there. There are some potential landmines or whatever else. But I'm just kind of picking them off for reputation. I think they've earned it.
Well, they got off to the hot start last year, and they was beating up teams, and they was winning like they was supposed to, and they was talking about being in the 14 playoff conversation until they ran into Ohio State, who had better talent than they had, and it showed Wisconsin was not prepared and wasn't ready for a team like Ohio State. So, in my opinion, maybe if they would get some players, add more depth, especially a defense, because at times when I was watching that conference game, they was on their heels and they was gasping for air, and the Ohio State offense was just torching them left and right until Wisconsin started getting it going and they started scoring, making stops. But the quarterback threw a key interception, which he didn't need to throw because the other player was wide open. So if they can, and he's coming back, so if he can improve on his mechanics, not throwing in double coverage and just take what the defense gives him and not cost the ball, then they'll be all right. Then they'll be in there, and they probably will make it to the 14th playoff. And they're getting most of their players back, and they can find a way to add more depth on defense, especially at the defensive line and secondary. Wisconsin might have a chance to win the division, maybe even the conference.
I want to ask you about this. With Wisconsin finishing with a record of 13-1, with their strength of schedule with this up and coming season, do you see them? Actually, what record do you have them finishing with, if I may ask?
Strength of schedule, I'm gonna say possibly 8-5.
I think they lose one regular season game in the Big Ten championship.
Because last year they have a soft schedule, but this year they got a little tougher. So that's why I say maybe 8-5.
Their offense has to be able to generate points. They scored 21 points against Ohio State in that championship game last year, but 18 was generated off of turnovers. So the offense was only able to manufacture 3 points without the help of the defense. So there were other games in the regular season where it was very, very similar to that, but they were able to. They were down 14-0 to Iowa because Iowa ran two interceptions back for touchdowns. Now, Wisconsin still went on to win 38-14. Clearly, should the better team was, but really looking forward to that game against Iowa, September 22nd, Week 4. Wisconsin and Iowa. I like watching those two teams play each other. It kind of reminds me of football in the 80s. pro set offense, play action pass, run between the tackles, no shotgun, spread, veer, read option, whatever else going on. So kind of cool.
All right, Mike and Luke both picking once again the Wisconsin Badgers to finish first in the West Division. We'll see how they'll build off of that 13-1 season from a year ago, and that also concludes the Western Division of the Big Ten Conference. When we come back from our brief break, we're going to talk about the Big Ten East. We got teams to discuss such as Michigan, such as Penn State, such as Michigan State, and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Find out where our experts, Luke and Mike, have them finishing in the Big Ten East. Stay tuned right here. Gameball Cards Kickoff will return. Welcome back to Gameball Cards Kickoff, where the football season never ends. Once again, I'm Marcus Young, Genius Jenkins.
I'm Michael Riley.
And I'm still Luke Hartnett.
And now we're going to switch from the West Division of the Big Ten. Now we're going to go to the Big Ten East. The first team we're going to discuss are the Maryland Terrapins. They finished with a record of 4-8 back in 2017. Luke, I actually want to start with you on this one. You have Maryland finishing 5th in the East Division. Why did you pick them 5th?
I think they're going to win the head-to-head games against Rutgers and Indiana and finish in 5th place there because I'm not sure any of those three teams have beat the top 4. I do think Maryland's good for a bowl game this year. They don't play Texas this year. They got that home and home out of the way. So, Texas is off the slate. They got a decent non-conference schedule. They beat Rutgers. They beat Indiana. They got some team. I think Maryland would actually finish in the middle tier of the Big Ten West Division. I put them in that maybe 3-4, maybe that 3-4 range in the Big Ten West. So they're certainly not lacking talent. Great young coach in there. He's got him on the right way. He's getting his recruits in there. It's, I believe, year 3 of his term there. But, I got the Terps Bowman.
All right. Mike, you actually have them not so much. You actually have them finishing last. Why do you have them finishing at the bottom of the pack?
Well, it's going to get a little bit harder for Maryland. And the reason why I haven't finished last due to last season. And one of the reasons why, because they got off to a good start when they went on the road, beat Texas at Texas. Nobody expect Maryland to beat Texas on the road to get that win. Then all of a sudden they just went on a losing streak and they just flat out hit a brick wall. They've been inconsistent and the offense is really haven't scored enough points. The defense is making more plays. That's what gave Maryland an advantage. But the offense was not producing and forced defense to be on the field a lot longer than they have to be. And Maryland had some good skilled players that went to the draft, especially the receiver side, who was drafted by the Panthers. So if they can find a way offensively to score more points and close out games to where the defense has not had to be on the field that long, then it'll be different. But the defense was on the field too long. The offense was anemic at most times. So that's why I put them at number 7 with a 4-8. They can prove me wrong, but I'm just going to stick with it. They're number 7.
All right, so we'll wait to see if you mentioned that their offense was definitely one of their weaknesses last year. So we'll definitely see if they improved off of that from
what week 1 doesn't look like they were off their game, but after that big win against Texas, it just seemed like a hangover, and it wasn't there.
All right, we'll see how Maryland improves. If they can, Mike once again has them finishing last. Luke has them finishing 5th in the East Division. We're going to jump to Rutgers. They also finished with a similar record, 4-8 back in 2017. Luke, we're going to swing this to you. Both you and Mike actually have this team finishing 6th. Why did you pick them to finish?
I actually don't think Rutgers is going to be too terribly bad this year. They open with Texas State, then they go to Ohio State, then they go to Kansas after that. I think they win the game in Lawrence, though. They play Illinois from the West Division. So right away you can start seeing 3, 4, 5 wins for them. without too much. They actually improved by leaps and bounds last year. I could tell that week one they had a home game against Washington, who they absolutely just got murdered by the year before in Seattle. They ran it back in East Rutherford last year, week one, and they only lost 30-14. They actually it wasn't until mid fourth quarter that Washington wound up getting that 2-possession lead. So I don't remember the halftime score. I believe they were winning at halftime though. Dante Pettis had to run a punt back for Washington to really kind of break it open for the Huskies in that game. What the point I'm trying to make is I could tell that they were going to be much better than the 2016 Rutgers version, which all things being equal shouldn't have been that hard to do. They were really bad 2 years ago. But I think they can improve by as much as they improved from 16 to 17. I think they can improve from 17 to 18. But gosh, that Big Ten East is just brutal. I feel like I'm doing them a favor picking them sixth.
All right, Mike. Once again, you picked them to finish the same way at sixth.
Well, against Washington, they played a very good first half. The offense was the similar offense as K-State because the offensive coordinator went over to be an offensive coordinator there at Rutgers. It was the same similarity. Take time off the clock and wear down the defense and play good defense. Then when the second half began, it was a totally different ball game. Rutgers got swept out by Washington, and Pettis, when he had that punt return, it was pretty much game over. And they lost some depth at the defensive line spot to the NFL, so if they can find a way to add more depth on the defensive line, and then the quarterback will be better in the second year of that offense, Rutgers might be able to do a little bit of damage in their first 5 or 6 games until they start playing Ohio State, Michigan State. It's just a brutal schedule. So number 6 is respectable if they can find a way to win, like maybe go 5-1 or 6-0 or 4-2. That'd be respectable, but you gotta play all these tough teams in that division. It's gonna be tough for Rutgers. But the first 5 or 6 games of the season, it'll be easy until once they hit Michigan State, Penn State, Ohio State, it's a wrap.
I do want to ask you guys this because you mentioned that their non-conference schedule is obviously a lot less difficult going into the Big Ten. Do you think something like that? Do you think that does them a favor at all before facing harsher competition, or does it really help them prepare for?
Well, they play Ohio State week 2, so I'm not sure how much it does for them. Getting. That kind of throws a wrinkle into things there, but it does make bowl eligibility a lot easier for them. Kind of like Illinois from the West Division.
Well, the first part when I looked at the schedule, if it was me, I'd rather play the harder teams. That way you could get more prepared for the next harder team. Like, this is what can we improve on. They beat the crap out of us or we lost a close game. We'll take it to the next opponent. So it kind of does them not a favor in a way, but maybe a little to get bullet eligibility. But if I'm a coach, I want to play the best competition and try to beat them at their best.
All right, Rutgers. It's going to be interesting to see how they end up finishing. Do they build off of that 4-8 season and maybe improve, or do they have a similar finish? It's going to be yet to be seen with this up-and-coming 2018 season. We're going to go from Rutgers, and we're going to go to the University of Indiana. They finished with a record of 5-7 last season. Mike, we'll start with you. You have Indiana finishing 5th. Why did you pick them at number 5?
Well, let's start off with the opener against Ohio State. It was the opener. They had Ohio State on their heels. They was going. I was getting ready to get to that. They was going blow for blow. They scored the first points of the game, and they had Ohio State on their heels at will until second half. Urban Meyer is one of the best coaches in the game, especially in college, to make second half adjustments and just blew Indiana off the water. And they won some games and they lost some games. But if they would have won at least 1-2 more games, there would have been bowl eligibility, and that would have made their record resume look a lot better. But for me, is they got They got to stay healthy offensively. They get most of their players back, especially at the wide receiver spot. And defensively, you have to make key stops at key moments. Don't just build off the first half, then lay it in there. You got to play 4 quarters of defense. If you don't play 4 quarters of defense, you are in trouble. So defensively, if Indiana can step up, they might be a 6 or 7 win team this year.
So you think they could rank a little bit higher just based off the experience going in from last season?
Exactly.
All right. You actually have them, Luke. You actually have Indiana finishing last in the East. Why do you have them finishing at the bottom?
I kind of have an inside source on this, if that's what you want to call it. I happen to work with the guy who's from Indiana. He's a Hoosier fan. I'm just taking his word for it. He says don't pick him this year. They had a nice little stretch there. They played Utah in a bowl game the year previous to last. I believe the year before that they took Michigan to 2 overtimes. They had a close call against Penn State. I think 2 out of 3 year stretch there. But I was more or less tipped off that it's kind of a bare cupboard for them this year.
All right, so Hoosiers, you guys kind of have them in the middle, 5th, and then of course Luke has them finishing last. We're gonna go from the Hoosiers and we're gonna go to the University of Michigan, who finished last season with a record of 8-5. Mike, we're gonna start with you with this one. You actually have them finishing number 4 in the East.
Well, they start off pretty good until they got to Michigan State and had 2 unnecessary turnovers and lost against their rival at home. And the quarterback was a disappointment all season. First game against Florida, he threw 2 pick sixes. And that's been the Michigan's downfall, is inconsistency for the quarterback position. If they would have had a good quarterback, they would be up there. They probably would be playing in a college playoff right now. But quarterback spot is what's killing Michigan's offense. They got that transfer kid quarterback from Ole Miss. So he'll step in right away and compete for the job. If he wins his starting job and can be consistent and not turn the ball over and give it to the playmakers, the sky's the limit for Michigan. They got good players on defense, good skilled players offense. The offensive lineman is, one of the best offensive linemen in that division. Maybe the conference, who knows? They got talented players everywhere except for the quarterback spot, and that's what I question. So if they get the quarterback spot straight now, they could be in and possibly be in the 14 playoff.
All right. Now, Luke, you actually have them ranked finishing 3rd in the Big Ten East. Why did you have them finishing 3rd?
Pretty much every major publication has them ranked anywhere between number 5 and number 18, which is just, solid ground to start with. They're a defense-heavy team. He mentioned the Ole Miss quarterback. I believe Shea Patterson is his name coming in there to get he'll be the best quarterback of the Jim Harbaugh era there for sure. They get Nebraska at home. They get Penn State at home. They finished the season playing the game at Ohio State this year. Been a minute since they beat the Buckeyes. Be kind of cool to see that game. See the Big Ten East come down to that game again. It has a few times before in the past. But the Michigan State game, that's kind of the tricky one right there. I think the winner of that one is most likely to finish 3rd in the conference there. So right now I'm leaning Michigan.
Well, if Michigan can get over their nemesis and beat Ohio State, then Michigan football is really back. Because Ohio State has owned Michigan for a period of some time. So if they can find a way to beat Michigan State and beat Ohio State, the sky's the limit for Michigan. So it all comes down to the quarterback.
They also get Wisconsin at home. Start the year at Notre Dame, though. So it's not a conference game, but that's going to be a night game at South Bend. It's what a way to kick off week 1.
Exactly.
8-5 finish. Let's see if Michigan does actually finally get over that hump, and we'll see what happens with the Wolverines going into this 2018 season.
Harbaugh's too good a coach for him to not get over the hump sooner or later, right?
Absolutely.
He's a good coach, but as I alluded to, the quarterback spot. That's what's killed Michigan the last 3 years from making it further.
So we're going to wait and see if they finally have that problem solved. So once again, Luke has them finishing number 3. Mike has them finishing 4th. We're going to stay with the state of Michigan, and we're going to jump to their big-time rivals, and that is the Spartans of Michigan State. Luke, we're going to swing to you on this one. You have the Spartans finishing number 4 in the East. Last year, they finished with a record of 10-3 back in 2017.
Yeah, they really. I mean, you might remember they was in the not the initial college football playoff. I think year 2 of the playoff there. And then they followed up with a 3-9 year after that. I remember they had a road win at Notre Dame in September there, and everyone thought it was like the greatest thing ever. And them and Notre Dame both really kind of bottomed out. Kind of comical looking back on it. But I mean they had to go to Ohio State last year. They get them at home this year, but drawback to that is they also have to go. They go to Penn State. You remember they upset Penn State last year in that like 6, 7, 8 hour game with the weather delays or whatever else. It just seemed like a day and a half. I would think it was Sunday by the time that game got over with a 11 a.m. kickoff time too, FYI. But no, they have to go to Penn State. So it's cool to get Ohio State at home. They kind of alternate year to year. I believe they have to go to Nebraska. That could be a bit of a trap game for them. That's going to be late in the season too. That's a mid-November game. I think they play I believe they play Nebraska's second to last game of the year, November 17th, right before Thanksgiving weekend, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a nice little balance right there. Basically, I think they lose to Michigan, so they finish 4th. And that's why I got Michigan finishing 3rd, because I think the winner Michigan State's playing for 3rd and 4th this year. And now Michigan, I think, has the higher ceiling because they get the Penn State game at home and the Notre Dame game is non-conference. So I think Michigan actually has a more legit chance to compete for the number 1 spot actually.
All right, Michigan State Spartans, strong finish, 10-3 back in 2017. We're going to go to the number 2 spot, and that is both of you have the Penn State Nittany Lions ranked number 2 in the Big Ten East. They will finish with a record of 11-2. I want to start with you. Why do you have Penn State finishing second?
Penn State was on a roll last season. I mean, with Saquon Barkley, the tight end, and everything was going well. They was playing with good defense until they ran to Ohio State. And Ohio State gave them their first loss. Then they lose again against Michigan State. And it just seems like the life was taken out of them when they had that first loss because they was all in the hype and could win the Big Ten playoff and also could be on the verge of making the 14 playoff. So then once they lost, they just fell out the map a little bit. Then they got back to their winning ways. Now, losing Saquon Barkley is huge because he was a one-man wrecking crew in that offense. So you have to find a way to replace that running back spot. Not get a Saquon Barkley type, but get a good running back that can pick up where Saquon Barkley left off. You also have a tight end you need to replace because he's went to the NFL draft and he was picked 2nd round by the Dolphins. So if you could solidify those 2 spots, and they got all their players coming back offensively, defensively, the sky's the limit for Penn State. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult this season, but I still say they'll finish out 2nd in the Big Ten East Division.
One thing I do want to ask you as well, of course, mentioning Saquon Barkley losing a great player like that, do you find them, of course you can't replace a guy like that, but do you also see them maybe, opponents maybe using that as a weakness that their running game may not be as strong as a year ago, and you see defenses actually targeting that if it is a potential weakness?
I do see that potential because you're going to see more defenses doing more defensive schemes, playing more zone blitz and coverage, and daring Penn State to beat them by running the ball. They'll plans to stop that and make them beat them with the passing game. So it will be a little difficult, especially with that player caliber gone. So you have to find a way to score points out of the backfield or in the passing game. Just mix it up a little bit. But if they can find a player that can contribute quickly and be consistent, the sky's the limit for Penn State.
Luke, like we mentioned, you also picked them second. Without Saquon Barkley, also without their starting tight end, you still also have them finishing second as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, we've seen teams lose running backs and move on all the time. The important thing is they're bringing Trace McSorley back as the dual threat quarterback, and probably one of the top 3 to 5 dual threat quarterbacks in all of college football. There, again, we saw. I mean, take Nebraska for example. They lost Mike Rozier. They plugged in Calvin Jones, then Derek Brown, then Lawrence Phillips, then Ahman Green, then Deron Dietrich, then Thunder Collins, and so on and so on. More recently, Alabama had Mark Ingram, had the running back number 3, whose name is slipping me now, with the top 3 pick.
Scarborough.
No, he was a pick by the Browns, number 3 overall. But then he was at the next point. Then it goes to Derrick Henry, then to Bo Scarborough, so on and so forth. But so I mean, like I said, we've seen teams, kind of lose running backs all the time. The important part is they get the they go quarterback to quarterback. And James Franklin has an eye for talent. He was actually an assistant at K-State when Ron Prince was there, but it was James Franklin during his time at K-State under Prince. He's the one that recruited Colin Klein to K-State, though. So I mean, the guy knows talent when he sees it. So I mean, moving on to the games here. They go to Pittsburgh week 2. You might remember they lost there a couple of years ago. Settled the score with them last year, but they going back to Pitt this year week 2. That's of course a non-conference game for them. Kind of unfair. They have to play my top 2 teams from the West, Iowa and Wisconsin, but they get both of them at home. They also get Ohio State and Michigan State at home. They go to Michigan. So if you got season tickets to Happy Valley, you might not be very happy all the time walking out of there. You're going to be entertained every time. There's going to be some great games being played there.
So you think that also could play to an advantage to how they also finish as well, because they have a tough schedule. However, those games are at home.
Yes, sans Michigan.
All right, Penn State Nittany Lions looking to build off of their 11-2 finish from 2017, which is going to bring us to that number 1 spot. And of course, Luke and Mike, you have the Ohio State Buckeyes finishing first in the Big Ten East, finishing with a record last year of 12-2. Mike, I want to swing it to you first. While you have them finishing at the top of the pack.
Urban Meyer, and he still has the coaching staff there, and they still recruiting like it ain't nothing. They've been the top 5 recruiting every year for the past 5 or 6 years, and they get good players to come in. You feel like once the players go into the NFL trap, they slip, and they don't slip. They still got one of the Bosa brothers is still playing there, which is Nick Bosa, and he is something special. He's like his brother, but his brother's better, but he still can ball out. That whole defensive line, they lost last year in the draft. They're reloaded. They keep adding to the pile. They're like the Alabama, but only in the Big Ten. And Urban Meyer does have a winning record against Nick Saban, just to put it out there. So, anyways, they just find their ways to keep reloading. And they also still have their defensive coordinator, who's supposed to get hired by Tennessee until something got leaked out and they backed off about it. Greg Schiano, who's still there, one of the best defensive coordinators in the game. And you also have an offense that could just rack up points. I don't know who's going to be the starting quarterback for the Ohio State Buckeyes. TJ Barrett was their best quarterback that they had since he's arrived at Ohio State. So who's going to replace him?
Yeah, it'll be the quarterback that finished the Michigan game. Haskins.
Something like that. But if they can find a way, if the quarterback can duplicate a little bit what TJ Barrett did, but not turn it over, Ohio State is still Ohio State.
Luke, have them finishing first. I would imagine a similar reasoning.
Yeah. I mean, it seems the top 25 doesn't come up for another month and a half. But I mean, it's pretty much a no-brainer. The top 4 in one order or another is going to be Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson. You can kind of take your pick on who's going to finish where in there. So another thing about Ohio State is they have a very favorable schedule. They don't play any Giants from the West Division. No Wisconsin, no Iowa, not the regular season anyway. They get Nebraska at home. They get the game against Michigan at home. They do go to Michigan State. They do go to Penn State. In week 3 in a non-conference game, they're at TCU, which should be interesting to say the least.
The thing about Ohio State, if they're going to make a run at the college playoff, they have to win the games that they should have won. Because they lost against Iowa, even though they won the Big Ten, that hurt their chances of making the 14th playoff. Instead of knocking Alabama out, they put Alabama in because that loss against Iowa. So Ohio State has to right their wrongs from that game last year. So, and they got them at home, I assume. So if they can win the games that they should win, most likely 90% of the time they do, But if they can win most of their games and win the Big Ten win out, then they can be in the 14 playoff. But that loss in Iowa, that blowout, it did not look good at all for Ohio State to be in that 14 playoff. That's why the committee didn't vote for them, even though they won the Big Ten. So Ohio State got to win most of their games that they should want to be able to compete for that national title in the 14 playoff.
Well, I mean, I think college football has a bit of a bigger problem on their hands here in a whole. I mean, I think Ohio State should have been in the playoffs last year.
Everybody.
And, I mean, the way I heard it put best was this. Ohio State missed the playoffs because they scheduled Oklahoma. Alabama made the playoffs because they scheduled Mercer.
I say I've actually
explain that.
Facts don't lie,
but it seems
look,
like
okay, they lost by 30-plus points against Iowa. The margin of victory, a little questionable. You're going to lose road conference games, though. They went out of their way to schedule a home-and-home with Oklahoma, went to Oklahoma the previous year, took them to the absolute woodshed, I had the paper returned on them, and got punished for it.
But it seems like the college playoff committee always favors the good teams in their schedule, and you have to look at the body of work what other teams have played in their schedule, even though they had a bad loss against Iowa. Oklahoma, that didn't hurt them as much. The Iowa one did, and they still went on to win the Big Ten championship, and Alabama didn't play for a conference championship. So are we...
Maybe they should have scheduled Mercer.
I'm just saying, are we falling low to more big name teams that doesn't air every year, or should we give other teams a chance that win their conference like they're supposed to, as opposed to Alabama who didn't win their conference? That's been the issue part.
And see, I agree with that, and I do like the whole Mercer thing. And this is a debate that we actually had last season, and that is not necessarily politics, but ratings. And of course, you're going to want to see Alabama. That's going to be something to where a lot of people would favor Alabama to be in a national championship. Ohio State, I strongly agree. I think almost everybody would agree that Ohio State should have been there. What I want to ask you is despite that disappointment, how do you see Ohio State overall finishing their season? And where you see them falling? Did they make it to the 14 playoff this time around? Did they make it to the national championship?
I think they lose a regular season game. Well, they win at Penn State, at Michigan State, at TCU, and they're going to run the table at home.
Well, it all comes down to the last game. It's the biggest game of the year, Michigan versus Ohio State. If Ohio State wins that game, they're going into the playoffs. But if they're losing, they're on the outside looking in.
Actually, in today's college football world, you're right. It does come down to the last game of the year, but it'd be the Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin, Iowa. Take your pick. In today's college football, that's actually a bigger game.
I know that, but it always.
Case in point, Alabama. They lost to Auburn, skipped out the entire SEC championship game, still got in there. So what I'm saying is, Big Ten East is on the line. Michigan beats Ohio State, gives them their first loss of the year. Michigan then turns around, loses the Big Ten championship game. There you go. No, there's got to be some other, other conferences and moving parts or whatever else. But
yeah, I agree with you that part somewhat, but it always comes down to the Michigan Ohio State game. The winner of that game more likely will win the Big Ten conference and move on to the playoffs.
I do want to ask this. That will actually wrap up the Big Ten East. Of course, Mike and Luke have the Ohio State Buckeyes finishing first in that division. What I want to ask you, as the Big Ten Conference as a whole, who do you see finishing first between, you have Wisconsin finishing first, and you in the West, and you have Ohio State, of course, like we just mentioned in the East. Who do you think wins that conference?
I think Ohio State wins every game this year.
Ohio State, for right now, Ohio State wins until Michigan, and that's going to decide the factor.
All right, and that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Gameball College Kickoff.
Social media, you can follow us on Facebook, Gameball College Kickoff / Gameball NFL Info. Email, send us an email. If you want to ask a question, send us a fan letter at gck.gnfle@gmail.com. Twitter, you can follow us on our official Twitter page at GCK_GNFLE. You can follow your boy, all caps, at Gameball_NYKE. You can also follow us on Instagram. Be a subscriber on Instagram at GCK_GNFLE. You can go to our clothing website. We got everything. We also launch workout t-shirts, tank tops, sleeveless, whatever. So purchase your gear at tokendesignstopeka.com/gameball. Again, that's tokendesignstopeka.com/gameball. And also, don't forget to click the subscribe button, my left to your right, wherever it is, on our YouTube channel, GCK.GNFLE TV. Help us grow, share, like, and dislike, and go on to the markets and excuse us for their commentator.
Also, first, speaking of which, we definitely want to thank the good people of the Lawrence Public Library here in Lawrence, Kansas, for always working with us to bring you this podcast on a weekly basis until we do return to Stonewall Pizza later on this fall. But as far as social media, of course, as always, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at JovelENT. Also, you can find me on Facebook under Marcus JovelENT Jenkins.
I'm on Facebook and Instagram as Luke Hartnett, and on Twitter as Luke Hartnett2.
That's 2.
All right, and that does it for this edition of Gameball College Kickoff. We'd also like to thank all of our sponsors, as well as all of you out there that have been supporting us since the first episode. Can't do this without you guys, so thank you for helping us continue to grow. So once again, right here at Gameball College Kickoff. Until next week, we'll see you then.
Peace. We are out.